Shabbos, Daf Zayin through Yud Gimel. And Daf Zayin, the Gemara talks about the idea of Rishus Harabim in various places that are adjacent to Rishus Harabim or within a Rishus Harabim. Still, they may not have the din of Rishus Harabim because they're not conveniently traversed, not conveniently accessed by the traffic in Rishus Harabim. The Gemara talks about Keren Zavi says Muchal Rishus Harabim, an area, according to one pshat, the houses are recessed, so there's a small area near the Rishus Harabim. It's not part of the main thoroughfare, but the Rishus Harabim traffic is imminent Dachbe Rabim. They sometimes go there. It's not a Rishus Harabim because Lo Necha Tashmishte. It's not really convenient for the Rabbim to use that spot, so it's only a Carmelis. Bein HaMudin, between certain poles, is a Carmelis, even though Darsi Be Rabim, many people walk there, but it's Lo Mistagilu Behedya. They can't walk there easily, so it's only a Carmelis. Istiva Shlofnei HaMudim, a platform in front of these poles, it's a Carmelis. The Gemara says that we can distinguish between the two. Itztiva is lo nechatash mishte. You can't conveniently walk on the itztiva because it's raised. But bein hamudim is nechatash mishte. Or the Gemara says bein hamudin is zimnin darsi be'rabim. People do walk there, so it is Rishus Harabim. The Gemara keeps going back and forth that it's spaces which are easily accessed, and the Rabbim use the Rishus Harabim. Other spaces, even if they're in the same place, if the Rabbim can't and doesn't easily walk there, it's not a Rishus Harabim. The Gemara talks about if you throw something and it lands on top of a brick, so if it lands al gaba potter on top of the brick, you're potter if the brick is 3 tfachim above the ground, because lo darsi be'rabim, because people can't walk on top of bricks that are raised 3 tfachim above the ground. Hizmi behigi, different types of bushes, even if they're logvi shlosha, then again they're not Rishus Harabim because you don't walk on hizmi behigi. You can't walk on these prickly, unpleasant bushes. Chiyah baravam or afilu hizmi behigi. Even his Vihigi people do walk on them. About Tsoa low, people don't walk on Tsoa, on excrement. Rashi explains they walk on his Vihigi with shoes, but Tsoa, even if it's not so high, you don't walk on Tsoa at all, even with your shoes. Rav Ashi says even Tsoa is some people do walk on it, so it would still be Rishus Harabim. But again, the general idea is that places where people don't walk are not going to be Rishus Harabim. The Gemara has another din also on Daf Zayin. It says that Carmelis is Tofesis Ad Asara. Rishus Harabim, the Gemara says, and Carmelis both only extend 10 tfachim high. Above that, the spaces in Makom Tur. Rishus Yachid is Ola Ad L'Rakia. Based on both these dinim, the idea that a space which is not easily trafficked, not commonly traversed, and the idea that above 10 tfachim is not Rishus Harabim or Carmelis, the Beis Ephraim wants to argue that when you measure Rishus Harabim has to have, according to some Rishonim we mentioned earlier, last week's share, Shishim Ribo, 600,000 people traveling there. Beis Ephraim argues we don't count riders of animals, those who sit in wagons. Contemporary poskim extend this to cars. We don't count vehicular traffic based on this Beis Ephraim. Why? Beis Ephraim has a number of arguments. One of them is based on this Gemara that above 10 tfachim it's not a Rishus Harabim and it's not a Carmelis. So since Rishus Harabim is only really the bottom 10 tfachim, the mechitzas are only relevant for the bottom 10 tfachim. Measuring Rabbim, deciding whether the space is traversed by a Rabbim is only the bottom 10 tfachim, so if people sit in vehicles or on animals above 10 tfachim, above the ground, they wouldn't count for the Shishim Ribo. Also he says that the idea is if any place that's low darsi be Rabbim, the Rabbim don't travel, like his Mivihigi, but Tsoa, according to those various opinions, is not a Rishus Harabim, he says. Even though, why? Maybe pedestrians don't walk on those things, but wagons and horses certainly can ride on top of Hizmi Behigi and Tsoa. So why is Marbal Shakmataria whether those things take away the din Rishus Harabim? We pass them, they're all Rishus Harabim, but still the Gemara had opinions that they aren't. It must be that we don't count anything but pedestrian traffic, and therefore we have to know where pedestrians go. This is the sheet of the Beis Ephraim and the great Eruv battles of the 20th century in New York. The Mekilim, the Klosenberger Rebbe, Rav Nasha Klein, others wanted to be Mekil, often brought this Beis Ephraim, at least as a sniff, that we don't count traffic other than pedestrian traffic. And Rosh Feinstein disagreed very strongly and said that we count all kinds of traffic, even traffic in cars. Beis Ephraim goes further and says even if you don't need Shishim Ribu, even according to the Rishonim that are stringent and say that as long as there's a Rabbim there, as long as it's a public thoroughfare, even that it has to be somewhat public. You don't need 600,000, you need some number of people. And once again, he says maybe we don't count the wagons. Whatever this Rabbim is, it would have to be pedestrian traffic. Rav Asher Weiss takes this one step further and says even if we don't accept the Beis Ephraim's idea, even if we say that we do count the traffic toward Rishus Harabim, but we only count spaces which are roi for pedestrian traffic. A space which is a thoroughfare, a space which is only suitable for traffic of wagons, he says, that's not like Diglei Midbar. He says, and it has to at least be as suitable for pedestrian traffic, and that's the idea of his Mivihigi. He says That's our Gemara. The Gemara says that there are places that might not be Rishus Harabim because people can't walk there. We come out that they are again, but the Gemara has ideas that there are certain places, certain opinions in the Gemara, there are certain places that are not suitable for traffic and not Rishus Harabim, even though they're certainly suitable, as the Beis Ephraim says, for horses and wagons. Teretz is, Rishus Harabim has to be suitable for pedestrian traffic. The Gemara says on one base, Chari Rishus Yachid, Rishus Yachid Damu, holes that open into a Rishus Yachid, even if they don't have the full dimensions of Rishus Yachid, they're ancillary to the real Rishus Yachid, and we treat them as Rishus Yachid. Chari Rishus Harabim, holes that open onto Rishus Harabim, holes in the wall that open onto Rishus Harabim. Machlokas, Abai Amar Rishus Harabim, Rav Amar Lav Rishus Harabim. We pass them like Rav, there's not Rishus Harabim, we evaluate those holes on their own. Contemporary posts can have an interesting application of this halacha. Let's say a person has a key and he wants to open his front door, and let's say the space outside his front door is not a Rishus Yachid. It's in a yard that doesn't have a fence, it opens onto a public street. So that space is either a Rishus Harabim sometimes, or a Carmelis. So if he's holding the key there in the Carmelis, and he puts it in the keyhole, so certainly taking the key into the house, the post can say, if you leave the key in the keyhole and swing the door open into the house, that's certainly a question of Hotzah, carrying the key from Rishus Harabim or Carmelis to Rishus Yachid. But even if you're not going to do that, you're just going to put the key in the keyhole, turn the lock, and then take the key back out. When that key is in the keyhole, if the keyhole runs all the way through to inside the house, then that keyhole might be Chari Rishus Yachid. And then by putting the key in the hole, that you just carried the key from outside to inside. Moshe Sternbach, other contemporary poskim are very concerned about this. They say maybe if it's not a hole, that's the Gemara's holes were suitable for storing small objects, like a little mailbox, for storing a little niche for storing property. The keyhole, you can't really do anything except use it for keys. Maybe that doesn't have a din Chari Rishus Yachid. Some say you should actually plug up the keyhole, at least for Shabbos, from the inside, leave it only open on the outside, so it won't be Chari Rishus Yachid. Rav Sternbach says maybe we can say that if you hold on to the key, if you don't actually release the key, that's a gudo biyado, which minimizes the problem that you're still standing outside, you're still holding the key, and if we say that, then and you do a kilach hayad, use your left hand, we can be medical, but it's not really that simple. It's not really that simple to take a key from an area with no eruv and you're outside your house, there's no fence around the yard. Even if you got the key somewhere there without carrying, you left it under the mat, or you carried it as part of a belt. But now if you pick up that key and you put it in the keyhole, that may very well be a problem of Hatzah from outside, from Carmelis or Rishus Harabim, to inside to Chari Rishus Yachid. The Gemara in Daf Tes talks about throwing a kaveris, throwing a beehive, like a large box, throwing it into Rishus Harabim. So if the kaveris is above certain dimensions, if it's Gavoa Yud, it's 10 tefachim tall, and it is 6 tefachim wide, that once it's 6 tefachim in diameter, 6 tefachim in diameter means that there's a square of 4 by 4 based on pi. That's not exact, Rashi says, but it's close enough that l'chumra. But I'll call upon him if it's 4 by 4 tefachim and 10 tefachim high, which is always the share of Rishus Yachid, then you are pater. Rava says even if it's less than that, there are chromias that stick up. But even without that, the first opinion of the Gemara says that if it meets these basic dimensions of 10 by 4 by 4, then you're pater. Rashi explains because it's a rishus la'atzma. The kaveris itself is a rishus. Usually you throw an item, you throw a baseball, you carry an item. Carry a pencil, but here you threw something which is a rishus, it's 10 by 10 by 4. We learned from the Mishkan. In the Mishkan they threw items like needles, they didn't throw rishuyos, so you're not chayav. Some posts can argue that the principle here is anytime you throw a rishus, you're not chayav. If you carry a rishus, you're not chayav either. So they talk about wagons or cars. If you pull a wagon, if an animal pulls a wagon, if that wagon is 10 tefachim tall, without the wheels they say, 10 tefachim tall, and 4 tefachim wide, it's a rishus b'fnei atzma, even though it's still osir to do it, but if a behemoth does it, normally a behemoth doing work is a lav of mechamer, which is also a biblical prohibition on Shabbos, but anything which is not a real malacha for a person, like throwing a rishus, is mutter for an animal. So the post can talk about, if an animal is pulling a wagon, there's nothing else in the wagon, just pulling the wagon itself, that might be mutter. And some posts can say driving a car. There are other isurim involved in driving a car. If there's any other property in the car, you carry the other property, but driving the car itself might not be hotzah because of this principle. Rav Moshe Feinstein disagrees. Rav Moshe Feinstein says that the Gemara is talking about zorik. This is a rule only when you throw the rishus. If you carry it, you drive it in a regular way, then that would be hotzah. But other poskim, Rav Menashe Klein, other poskim suggest that Rav Menashe Klein makes machlokes the poskim out of it. Other poskim say that even if you carry something, if that something is a rishus, it's 10 tefachim high by 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, that's not hotzah daraisa for Shabbos. The Gemara says if a person is in a rishus harabim and his eruv, he's making an eruv tchumen, that eruv tchumen or eruv chatzeros, So if a person's Eruv is inside a Carmelis, let's say Eruv Tchumen, so the Gemara says, according to the Shitas Rebbe that says Kol Davar Shumishim Shvus Lo Gazr Lo Ben Hashmashos, anything which is only involves an Isur Drabanan, the Isur doesn't apply Ben Hashmashos. Even though he can't reach his Eruv, he can't carry his Eruv back to where he is Ben Hashmashos. Normally the rule is the Eruv has to be accessible Ben Hashmashos. But if there's a Malacha Daraisa, it's inside a box, and breaking open the door of the box would be Malacha Daraisa, the Eruv is inaccessible. But if the Eruv is only inaccessible because of a Shvus, even though you can't do the Shvus on Shabbos, but Ben Hashmashos, which is the critical point in time for the Eruv to take effect, since Kol Davar Shumishim Shvus Lo Gazr Lo Ben Hashmashos, Shvusim don't apply Ben Hashmashos, the Eruv is considered accessible. So if we're getting about Eruv for the moment, this principle is brought lahalacha. We pass like this rule of Rebbe. The Shulchan Aruch says Kol Shvus Drabanan, any rabbinic prohibition is mutter Ben Hashmashos, but only we pass if it's tzarach mitzvah or for other cases of great need, that you don't have your light for Shabbos, or you have other needs, you didn't take off meiser, your food is not going to be suitable to be eaten on Shabbos, so for a mitzvah or for a great need, the Chazal waived the prohibitions of Shvus for the period of Ben Hashmashos. The Mishnah Berurah says not really all Shvusim. Certain Shvusim are more stringent, but certain Shvusim at least they were lenient. Many Shvusim they were lenient on Ben Hashmashos. Shulchan Aruch gives other examples of mitzvah or great need. You have to get a lulav or a shofar. You have your Eruv, you want to get the Eruv down, or if you have some other matter of great urgency, these are cases of mitzvah, and for certain shvusim, like carrying in a carmelis, they were lenient Ben Hashmashos. The Mishnah Berurah adds another chumrah. This is only if you're not Makabel Shabbos, if you didn't say Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos, L'chadodi, if you weren't Makabel Shabbos yet, and it's Ben Hashmashos, you can be lenient on a shvus, B'makom mitzvah, or a great need. If you were Makabel Shabbos, or the Tzibur was Makabel Shabbos, then there's no such heter. You really have to Makabel Shabbos before Shabbos starts, so I'm not sure how you got to Ben Hashmashos without being Makabel Shabbos, but if you didn't, then you can do the shvus for mitzvah or great need. The Achronim also are not sure whether this applies to Matzei Shabbos. If it's Ben Hashmashos Matzei Shabbos, it's after Shkia, but it's not yet Laila, it's not yet nightfall. Can you do shvusim? Some say maybe yes. Some say Erev Shabbos is more lenient because Shabbos hasn't come yet. But Matzei Shabbos is already here. We say the Kedusha doesn't leave until it's Vadei Laila. Poskim go back and forth. The Mishnah Berurah brings Yishu Machmer. We're not even sure exactly when Ben Hashmashos is, so certainly how long it extends. So certainly we're not even sure when it starts, exactly how long it is. So certainly you should not be lenient about this on Matzei Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah recommends. On Daf Tes, the Mishnah says a person shouldn't start doing certain things once it is the time to daven mincha. He shouldn't start taking haircuts, shouldn't go into the merchatz, the bathhouse, other activities. Also, he shouldn't start eating. There is a discussion in the Gemara, extensive discussion in the Gemara here. The poskim, we covered this back in Brachas and Daf Chavches. Many different opinions about whether this applies to mincha gedola or mincha ketana, what kind of meal. But there are many cases where you're not supposed to eat. Certainly, many halachas that you're not supposed to do. Certainly, once it comes to mincha ketana, the later mincha, we're much more strict. And in many cases, you're really not supposed to eat. So do certain other things once the Zman mincha has arrived. One of the heterim the poskim give, we discussed then various heterim. One of the heterim the poskim give is the idea of a shomer, appointing someone with the duty to remind you to daven mincha. You're going to eat now. Remind me after I eat. I still have to daven mincha. So interestingly enough, the Gemara doesn't talk about shomer. The Rishonim don't talk about shomer. A number of 20th century Achronim assume that shomer works. Mishnah Berurah says, Mishnah Berurah is talking about davening Marav. He says eating before Marav. You can appoint a shomer to remind you to daven. Other Achronim also are the Arletzion, or Betzion Abba Shaul, talk about the idea of using a shomer, the Aruch HaShulchan. They say that you can use a shomer to remind you to daven. Aruch HaShulchan is not sure whether a person can take a nap once it's time for mincha. He says that the Gemara in Brachos said at night you shouldn't sleep before davening. At night is Zman Shina, it's sleep time. There's a real chance you'll fall asleep, and the next thing you know it'll be morning. Afternoon, you're not going to sleep that long. Maybe sleeping is okay. He's not sure, but also he says you can appoint a shomer, appoint someone a shomer to wake you up. Even though he says normally we say arvach tzarich, you can't appoint a shomer because maybe he'll forget too. He says that here this wouldn't be such a concern. You still have more time to daven mincha. We would rely on a shomer. He says, unless it's right before the end of mincha. He says that better. He says it's better to daven mincha first before you take a nap. But he has a tzad that you can rely on a shomer. The Arletzion says you can rely on a shomer for tefillos. However, he says that not for daraisa. If it's marav and you haven't done kriya shema, you shouldn't rely on a shomer, since after all, the idea of shomer doesn't have a clear basis in the Rishonim. He says a person can rely on his wife to make her a shomer to remind him to daven, even though she's eating. Normally, he brings the Aruch HaShulchan's issue. Normally, we say certainly if the other person also is doing the thing that might be distracting. He might forget if he's eating or she's eating with you. Normally, that's not an acceptable shomer. So he says, specifically with regard to one's wife, he says, we're not worried that she'll forget, because a woman is emas baila. She has awe, takes her husband very seriously, and she will not forget to do her duty to remind him to daven mincha. Also, he says you can rely on an alarm clock as long as the person commits to stopping to eat as soon as his alarm rings, or I guess resetting the alarm, putting snooze, it'll ring 10 minutes later. The alarm clock works too. Many contemporary posts can say the same thing, that an alarm clock that will ring and notify you is the equivalent of a shomer. The Gemara in Daf Yud goes back again, more Halachos Tefillah. The Halachos reminiscent of brachas. The Gemara talks about whether you're allowed to daven without wearing your sash, your chagura. The Gemara says, why can't you daven without it? The Gemara says, no, it says, Hikon l'kras Elokecha Yisrael, a person should prepare himself for davening to meet Hashem. And this is brought in Shulchan Aruch, a person should wear a belt when he davens. Tosfos brings an opinion that it's because of liba ras ha'erva, as we saw in brachos. There's a concern, there has to be something separating between your lave, your heart, and your erva, your lower parts. However, the Ikar Lahalacha, the Shulchan Aruch, most posts can paskin. It's not because of that. Even if a person already satisfied that requirement, his pants are elastic, his underwear is elastic, he already has something separating libo and erva. You need to have, this is a new din, you need to have some kind of sash, some kind of belt, because of Hikon Likras Elokecha Yisrael, because of preparing properly for davening. Now, we don't always do this. Mishnah Berurah brings, some posts can say that this is only someone who normally wears a chagura, it's part of his normal outfit, and he would be underdressed if he didn't wear it, but someone who that's not part of his normal attire, he doesn't wear a chagura, doesn't have to wear one during davening. However, Mishnah Berurah brings from the Magen Giborim, Midas Chasidus, Afbachi Agavna, it's Midas Chasidus to always wear a chagura, even if it's not, you don't normally wear one during the day. Hasidim, of course, are noted for their punctiliousness about this. This is what the gartel that they wear. Aruch HaShulchan brings this. He says it's a mitzvah to wear a chagura shekar and gartel beis tefillah. He says the person should wear a chagura because of Hikon l'kras Elokecha Yisrael. He brings that the early post Magen Avraham say you don't have to if you don't normally wear one. However, he says some medakta can wear one anyway because it's an honor for the tefillah. Still not sure whether they meant like the Hasidim for mystic reasons or they just meant because in their time it was considered part of being properly dressed. Even if you dress a little bit informally, you should wear one when you daven. But in a culture where it's not part of a normal dress, you can be perfectly dressed and not be wearing a belt. I'm not sure if even these poskim would say you need to wear a gartel, but certainly that is the minhag of the Hasidim. They wear a gartel. It's based on this halacha. The Gemara goes on and brings various other examples of what the Amoraim would do to proper attire and proper deportment during davening. The Gemara says Rabbi Bar Huna would wear puzmiki on pilos, chashuvim, fancy stockings or leggings of some sort because of Hikon Likras Elokecha Yisrael. Rava would throw off his coat so he wouldn't look like he was too dressed, like he was too fancily dressed. He wanted to be a little simpler, a little more down to earth. Also, he was pachar yadeh. He would hold his hands and his fingers like a person who's mistar, a person who's worried and anxious. He would daven ka'avda kamei mare, like a servant in front of his master. Rav Ashi says, Asoraf Kahana, he would vary. When there was a case of Tzara Balma, the world was in a distressed situation, as it is these days, then he would do that thing. He would take off his coat and he would be Pachar Yadeh, Ka'avda Kamei Mare, like a slave before a master. When it was Shlama, when times were better, then he would dress nicely and he would daven. He would say, no, now I have to daven, I have to look presentable, I have to look more respectable because of Hikon Likras Elokecha Yisrael. Shulchan Aruch brings, you have to daven properly attired, you shouldn't wear your belt, which was a kind of money belt. People didn't dress like that in fancy occasions. You can't have your head uncovered, you can't have your feet uncovered. If the Shulchan Aruch says that that's the custom of people in that culture not to dress that way when they stand b'fnei Gedolim, when they stand in front of distinguished people. Mishnah Berurah brings, again from the Achronim, you can't have Rosh Megula. You certainly shouldn't be bareheaded when you daven, but even if you're wearing a yarmulke, he says, you should wear a hat because that's the way you would go in the street. You shouldn't wear the yarmulke that you wear indoors because you wouldn't go in front of anashim chashuvim, you wouldn't stand in front of distinguished people wearing only a yarmulke. So Mikra Din would seem you don't have to wear a hat because today, certainly post-Kennedy, a hat is not part of the standard attire of people. It used to be, the breadlines in the Great Depression, it used to be everyone wore a hat outside, and then certainly this halacha was true. Bisman Hazeh, where it's not the derech to stand in front of Gedolim with a hat, Mikra Din you wouldn't have to. It is the custom in the yeshiva world certainly to wear a hat, and some contemporary posts can recommend it. Similar to the gartel that we saw, that Mikra Din, you don't have to wear one if it's not what people wear, not what you wear, it's not what people wear during the day. Gartel, we said, Midah Chasidus and hat, it's the minhag of the yeshivas to wear it, even though the way the early posts can express it, it depends on what you would wear when you stand with B'nai Gedolim. You shouldn't stand with uncovered feet. However, if your outer garments are long and they cover your feet, even if you're not wearing socks and shoes, or in very hot climes where people stand bare feet in front of Gedolim, then barefoot in front of Gedolim. Again, you don't have to worry because that's the custom. That's how people dress in that place. Shulchan says, Klal shel davar, you have to dress. Other posts can use the language of how you would prepare b'fnei Gedolim. He says, how you would go outside. A person who is properly dressed when he walks outside, he's dressed normally, dress that way when you daven. Posts can say you shouldn't wear pajamas when you daven. Mishmur brings from the Magen Avram, you can't wear, he says, the kolshkein shlafmet. You shouldn't wear things that you wouldn't wear in front of Gedolim, certainly not pajamas. There's also a halacha, it says they would stand ka'avda kamei mare, they would stand be'ema with awe in front of Hashem. Mishnah Berurah brings from the Achronim, yeshlis noah, a person should shackle, a person should rock or sway when he davens, like I'm doing now, kind of. Why? There are different reasons the post can give. Mishnah Berurah brings the reason, Mishum kalatz mosei tamarna Hashem mikamocha, all my bones, my entire body should participate in the praying to Hashem. Other posts can talk about how shuckling and moving around too much can be distracting. It can give a bizarre appearance. There's a story they tell about Ramosha. I've heard this, I've read this, I don't have an authoritative source for it. They say he would stand and daven without moving, he would be motionless, and he explained that in Russia, when someone needed to stand before the government officials, the proper way to stand and show respect was he would stand motionless, he wouldn't move, so he stood that way before Hashem. The Gemara says that you are not allowed to say Shalom Aleichem, you're not allowed to greet someone with Shalom in a Beis HaMerchatz, because Vayikra lo Hashem Shalom, Shalom is the name of Hashem. The Gemara says, what about a name like Hemnusa? Hashem is called Hakel HaNeman. So the Gemara says, no, that's just a description. We call Hashem Eloka Mehemna. But here, Hashem's name itself is Shalom. That's how we paskin. You're not allowed to say Sheila Shalom in a merchatz, in a bathhouse, in any place that's dirty and that you can't say Divrei Torah, and so on. You're not allowed to greet someone with the name of Shalom. What about calling a person whose name is Shalom? That Mishnah Berurah brings as machlokas. Some say you cannot call him Shalom. Some say that no, that's different. You're not using the word Shalom to mean peace. You're just calling him by his name. Some say that's okay. Mikra Din, he says it's mutter. The minhag is to be mekil, it's drabanan, so you can be lenient. He says, however, a Yarei Shamayim, one who has fear of Hashem, should be stringent about this because many Achronim say it's usher. What should you do if that's his name? What are you supposed to do? You could just say, hey you, I guess, but if you want to be a little more civilized, Mishnah Berurah says you should leave out one of the letters. You shouldn't say the mem, say shalo, or say shalom with a nun. You shouldn't actually say Hashem's name you shouldn't actually call your friend whose name is Shalom in the bathroom. It's better not to. Similarly, he says in an Igeres Rishus, in a private letter, you shouldn't write the word Shalom fully with the Vav. You should leave out the Vav. You write just Shin, Lam, and Mem, because people throw away letters. You're not supposed to write Hashem's name in a letter that will be thrown away, so you shouldn't write even the word Shalom. The Mishnah Berurah says you shouldn't write in a letter which is apt to be discarded. The Gemara says that a person, on Yudam and Beis, the Gemara says a person should not be Mishana, B'no Ben Abanim. A person, when he disposes of his assets, he should not favor one son over the others. Because look what happened with Yaakov and Yosef. He gave him a relatively cheap garment. It was Mishkal Shnei Slam Milas, a fancy garment, but it was one little thing. Because of that created, eventually they wound up going down to Mitzrayim because of that. It had terrible effects. So a person should not cause jealousy by favoring one son above the others. This is brought by the poskim. Shulchan Aruch leaves it out. Some Achronim wonder why, but Rambam and Tur and other poskim bring it. Rambam says, Tzivu Chachamim commanded a person should not be Mishana Adam Ben Abanim, should not make invidious distinctions, B'chayev. Rambam says the person shouldn't do it while he's alive. The Bach says it only applies while he's alive, but in a person's will, in bequest that he makes on his deathbed for after his death, that's okay. Some people are machmer. There are other Achronim who are machmer and say that others don't say B'chayev. This is a machlokas where this applies even to a will, that a person shouldn't make invidious distinctions between his children. Daf Yud Aleph, the Gemara brings a halacha that a city in which the houses are taller than the shul is going to end up being destroyed. The shul is supposed to be the tallest building. First of all, the shul is supposed to be built on the highest part of the city, but beyond that, even if the shul is built that way, but if the other houses are taller and rise above the shul, that's wrong, and it's going to lead to a tremendous punishment from Hashem. It says, L'romim es beis Elokeinu, the house of Hashem should be elevated, L'hamar es charvosav, so the shul should be taller than all the houses. One exception, the Gemara says, Hanami Libabatim, only houses that will be kashkushe, vavrure, leslan. We pass, and these are buildings that are not used, they're just built for aesthetics. So the halacha is in Shulchan Aruch, the shul has to be begavish alir, the highest part of the city, and it should be taller than all other houses, except for these types of buildings, which people don't use the roofs of those buildings, so it doesn't matter if they're taller than the shul. We often do not do this. We often have our shuls that are built in places, built in ways that the surrounding houses are taller in the neighborhood. Mishmura mentions this. He say, Ein is harin bazeh, some places. Achronim say, because anyway, there are non-Jewish houses that are built taller than the shul, so if we have one more house, the Jewish houses are also taller, it doesn't really matter. Why aren't we obligated to make the shul taller than the non-Jewish houses? I assume it was just not practical, either for legal reasons, or for cultural reasons, for social reasons, for political reasons. Whatever it was, we couldn't do that. It wasn't possible, it wasn't practical to build the shul taller than the non-Jewish houses. So even though we could have limited the Jewish houses and kept them smaller, it doesn't matter. The Mishmur brings B'Shem Nachronim that once other houses are taller than the shul, Meikar Adin, there's basis for leniency that our houses too can be taller than the shul. However, he says, that's a limud schos on the minhag. He says, however, roy l'chatchil lizar b'zeh b'chol madafsher. A person really should try to be stringent about this to the extent possible, because the Gemara says terrible things happen if you don't do this. So really, this is halacha that may be honored in the breach, but people should try to be more careful about it. The Gemara says that people who are studying Torah interrupt their Torah to read Kriya Shema, but not for tefillah, not for davening. Rabbi Yochanan says that only applies to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai v'Chaveira, their Terasa and Umnasa. They did nothing else but learn. They didn't work. They didn't do other things. For them, they don't have to interrupt for davening. But us, normal people, we have to be mafsik for Kriya Shema and Tefillah. That is how we paskin. However, the Ramah says that's a person's private learning. A person is teaching Torah, lomeid lacherim. You don't have to interrupt for Tefillah. However, he says you should at least say one pasuk of Kriya Shema, and if a person, and this is all, and that's the Ramah passing. A person should interrupt at least for one pasuk of Kriya Shema. If a person is going to have time to, if a person not going to have time, then he shouldn't. If a person if he can daven later, then he shouldn't interrupt at all, even for Kriya Shema. If he doesn't have enough time and he's not going to be able to daven later, he should at least interrupt for the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. And if he has enough time, he doesn't have to interrupt at all. He can just say, "I'll do everything later. Right now, I'm learning Torah." The Mishmur says the implication of the Ramah seems to be that when you're learning Torah, even if you're going to miss this man, you should be mafsik, except maybe for the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, but you should not be mafsik except maybe for the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. However, that's only when the learning Torah is so important that you're not going to be able to get the share together later. The people are here now. If you tell them I have to stop and have to daven or say Kriya Shema, they're going to disband. They won't come back. If you can just learn later, then certainly you shouldn't miss Kriya Shema and Tefillah if you can just make up the share later. Chayadim Paskins, he says, Chayadim is mashma that you should always interrupt if you're going to miss man Tefillah. Mishmur also brings that other poskim say that we should be machmer, that we shouldn't keep learning even if it's a public share and we're going to miss the opportunity if we're mafsik for Kriya Shema and Tefillah. Certainly you shouldn't start learning a public share if you see it's man Kriya Shema and you realize that you're going to miss this man. The Gemara brings a Mishnah. We have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says a tailor shouldn't go outside, or even inside. A person shouldn't carry around his needle when it's Samach L'Chashecha, Erev Shabbos, when it's near nightfall, because he may forget and carry it even after nightfall, even once it's already Shabbos. The Gemara says, are we talking about a needle which is Tchuvel B'Bigda, which is stuck into his clothing? If he carries that needle, that's not Derech Hatzah, so that'll be Drabanan. Now that would be a question of Gzeira L'Gzeira. You shouldn't put it in now, because maybe on Shabbos you'll carry it out, and even then it'll only be Drabanan, so it's Gzeira L'Gzeira. The Gemara says, no, it's only us if you're actually holding the needle. Then it's only one Gzeira, because if you carry it while you're holding it, that'll be Hatzah, absolutely Hatzah. So the halacha seems to be a single Gzeira we make, a double Gzeira we don't make. Mishnah Berurah says this applies to any other items, not just needles. You shouldn't carry anything in your hand when it's too close to nightfall on Erev Shabbos. Or in your pockets, he says, you can't do that either. However, he says that since the principle is we don't make a Gzeira, he says if you don't have Rosh Hashanah, if outside if all our public spaces are only Carmelists, there are many shittas that say for various reasons that we don't have real Rosh Hashanah B'zman Hazeh. We keep mentioning the shitta of Rashi. If you don't have 600,000 people, there's no Rosh Hashanah. So many Rishonim said, many poskim have said that we don't really ever have that. We never have Rosh Hashanah, or it might be other reasons we don't have Rosh Hashanah. So if we don't have Rosh Hashanah, then again it's only Gzeira L'Gzeira, because even if you do forget and carry it on Shabbos, it'll only be Drabanan to a Carmelist. Some poskim say this whole Isser doesn't apply B'zman Hazeh. However, the Mishnah Berurah says many poskim say that we do have Rosh Hashanah B'zman Hazeh. We don't pass like Rashi, or that we're machmer, that we do have Rosh Hashanah B'zman Hazeh. And the Vilna Gaon, he says, concludes that if it's really close to Shkia, Samach Shkia Mamish, whoever close that is, even a Karmelis is Aser. So there is a Chumrah, even Bizman Hazeh, the person shouldn't carry things late Friday afternoon when it's close to Shkia. The Gemara talks about carrying different types of wearing or carrying different types of garments or protective cloths that were meant to prevent someone who was leaking bodily fluids from soiling himself, a zav, someone who's emitting different types of fluid. So the Gemara says there is an isser. However, we paskin, you can't wear it if the purpose of that thing is only to protect your clothing. So you shouldn't get dirty. A woman who wears pads or things can put these things in if she's walking in a Rosh Hashanah in a public place to avoid getting dirty from the damnida, from the menstrual flow, he says. However, if it's a malbush, if it's derech malbush, then it's mutter. The Shulchan Aruch says anything which is derech malbush, even if your purpose in wearing it is only to protect you from dirt, that's okay. So if it's structured as a garment, it's okay. You can wear a raincoat or a rain hat, hats that are meant to protect you from getting dirty. If they're really derech malbush, if they're actually hats or coats, that's always mutter. Even things that are not derech malbush, that are just pads or not really clothing, that's only a problem if the goal is to prevent your clothing from getting dirty. But because we say atzulei tinuk, to stop you from getting dirty, it doesn't allow you to carry it on Shabbos. However, if you're wearing it so the fluid shouldn't hurt you, so the blood shouldn't dry on you, and then it will be uncomfortable. If you're wearing it to protect your body, that's mutter, even if it is not derech malbush. The Gemara in Daf Yud Beis, the Gemara brings a famous statement of Hanania. We say it on Erev Shabbos, at least Mr. Ashkenaz does. We say chayav adul mashish bigdo Erev Shabbos mechashecha. A person should check his clothing on Erev Shabbos close to nightfall to make sure there's nothing in his pockets because he might come to carry it on Shabbos. Hilchas arabsa l'shabsa. That is an important halacha. The Aruch HaShulchan explains it's a shmira gedola. It's a great protection against accidentally carrying things on Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah says the same thing applies on Shabbos too. If a person is about to leave his house and walk somewhere where there's no eruv, a person should if inside you carry things, you carry tissues, you carry things inside your pockets when you're inside, a person should check his clothing too before he leaves the house, before he goes outside the eruv on Shabbos as well. The Aruch HaShulchan is very concerned that the Shulchan Aruch, the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch dial down the severity of this imperative. The Lashon of the Gemara is chayav. Chayav anol mashrish bigdo. The Torah and Shulchan Aruch say mitzvah. It's only a mitzvah, he says. Even though we don't really have Rosh Hashanah, we mentioned earlier, even though poskim say we don't have a bona fide Rosh Hashanah, still you might have muktzah things in your pockets that need to come out before Shabbos. So it's a hilchas arabsa l'shabsa. So Shulchan says we should take this halacha more seriously. The Gemara brings machlokas and Daf Yud Beis again. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says you can't make shidduchim for girls. You can't make arrangements for a child to lamdo sefer, to attend school, lamdo omnis, to learn a trade. You can't do nicham avelim. You can't bikur cholim, visit the sick. Can't do all those things on Shabbos, Beis Shammai says. However, Beis Hillel matir and Beis Hillel allows all these things. This is what we say in one of the popular miras of Shabbos, Ma Yedidus, Chafatzecha Asurim, V'gam Lachashav Cheshbonos. There is generally a prohibition, Mimtzoch Hefzecha V'daber Davar, there's generally a prohibition in engaging in weekday type activities on Shabbos. Weekday type talking about weekday things, Herurim are okay, but talking about weekday things are generally prohibited. However, for a mitzvah, it's okay. Herurim mutarim, and also l'shadech habanos, like Beis Hillel, to make shidduchim for girls, tinach olam sefer, to teach him schoolwork, and that's mutter. Shulchan Aruch passes this way. Cheftei shemayim mutter, cheshbonos shel mitzvah. You're allowed to do a cheshbonos of mitzvah to arrange for tzedakah, public needs, l'shadech tinok, to arrange for a child to get married, le'ares, olam sefer, umnas, all these things that we pass in l'maisa, they are mutter. The Ramah says that some say that when someone gets an aliyah for the Torah and it makes a mishaberach, you shouldn't say how much he's going to give. You shouldn't say $18, $54, $1,000, whatever it is. The meaning is timekel, because mutter lifts tzedakah. Anything for a mitzvah is mutter. So to make arrangements, you don't actually pay the tzedakah on Shabbos. To make arrangements for the giving of tzedakah, that's okay, even on Shabbos. The Gemara goes on, talks of Bikur Cholim. We just said Beis Shammai says you can't be Mavakar Cholim. Beis Hillel says you could. Nicham Avelim. The Gemara brings various different versions of what you're supposed to say on Shabbos. You're not supposed to use the same language that you say during the week. The Mishnah Berurah explains, Mitzvah Mara Bechi, using the same language that you say during the week is sad, it's depressing, so you should change the lashon to be less tearful. So one shita says you say Shabbos Limilizak Urefuah Krov Alavo. Rameir says you say Yechola Hishatarachem. Yehuda says Makam Yerachem Alecha Bal Chola Yisrael. Rabbi Yosef says Makam Yerachem Alecha Betel Chola Yisrael. Shavna Ish Yerushalayim says, he would say, Shabbat Yimilizar, Kurefuah Krov Alava, V'rachma Merubim, V'shabbato, V'shivto, V'shalom. So, how do we paskin? We pass you're allowed to nichum avelim and bikur cholim on Shabbos. And you say Shabbos yimilizik refuah krova lavo v'rachma merubim v'shivto shabbato b'shalom. We say the whole nusach of Shabbos. That's what the Mechaber says. The Ramah says, and no, we don't say v'rachma merubim. We go like the Tanakama, who just says Shabbos yimilizok refuah krova lavo. Question whether it's machlokas or not, but the minhag is we say Shabbos yimilizik refuah krova lavo. The Aruch HaShulchan is unhappy with contemporary practice. He brings the Shulchan Aruch Rav says you should not say Hamakom Yishlach Refuah. We say Yishlach Hashem Refuah Shlema, Refuah Nevesh, Refuah Seguf. Shabbat Yimlizik Refuah Krav Alavo. The Shulchan Aruch Rav says you should not say Hamakom Yishlach Refuah. Aruch HaShulchan says today we say both. We say Yishlach Lo Refuah Shlema, and then we say Shabbat Yimlizik. That's how the Siddurim have it. He says Aruch HaShulchan is unhappy. He says Lo Yadati Mihiter Lehem Zeh. Who allows you to say Yishlach Refuah Shlema? Even if you're saying Shabbat Yimlizik, he understands when the Gemara says Shabbat Yimlizik, you only say that. It doesn't help to add that to the regular nusach you say during the week. You have to only say that and not say the nusach you say during the week. Unless the chol is Mesukah Gadol, the chol is in grave danger, he's in critical condition, he's in danger for that day, then you can say Yishlach Refuah Shlema. Other than that, you should just say Shabbat Yimlizik and you should not say Yishlach Refuah Shlema. The Gemara goes on, the Gemara says, Bekoshi Yatiru L'Nachma Ve'elim L'Vakar Chol B'Shabbos. Grudgingly, Chazal allowed it, but grudgingly. Beis Shammai says Asur, Beis Hillel says Mutter, but only grudgingly. Mishnah Berurah and Aruch HaShulchan bring from the Achronim that it's wrong, Magen Avram. It's someone who doesn't do these things all week, and Shabbos he has spare time, he decides to check off his Nichum Avelim Bikkur Kol, and that's wrong. If the person does it during the week also, we can do it on Shabbos as well. But someone who's going to save it for Shabbos, that's wrong, because it's not really ideal to do on Shabbos, unless the Aruch HaShulchan brings from the Shari Tshuva that unless someone is too busy during the week, then he can do it on Shabbos. The Gemara has an extended discussion about the prohibition, going back to the Mishnah already, prohibition again about reading by candlelight or by oil lamp. There's a concern, shemayata, that you may, if the nair often doesn't burn well, you have to adjust it. That's a question of malacha, of mavir. The Gemara has the intricate details, rules, when you're allowed to, when you're not allowed to. We don't really practice this halacha b'zman hazeh. Why not? So first of all, the early Polish Akarim, the Bach, the Magen Avram brings from the Bach, from the Marshal. Now we're makel, but for wax candles, because there's no shemayata. Wax candles, they burn cleanly, there's no fiddling with them, you don't fuss with them. So the whole gzeira, shemayata doesn't apply, so wax candles are okay. In the 20th century, the Mishnah Berurah, the Aruch HaShulchan, talk about the fact that in their day, they weren't even using wax, they were using Neirus Mamish, lamps of different types of liquids that were burning. So the Mishnah Berurah, the Aruch HaShulchan, they say they don't understand why we makel. It's everyone's makel to read this. This is a clear Gemara. You're not allowed to do this. Clear Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed to read. The Aruch HaShulchan says, Rabbim in Israel, they learn using these lamps. People are tameh. How can you be matter? Wax candles is basically to be lenient, but these types of lamps, what's the heter? So Mishnah Berurah brings, he heard Anshe Maisa, people who are meticulous about their deeds, they write little pieces of paper in large letters, Shabbos, Asr Lahadlik, and they stick these papers on the lamps so they'll see the paper. He explains why that's okay. Then he brings the other heterim, another heter, that these types of lamps, they burn well as long as they have fuel, they burn cleanly, they're not like the old oil lamps that have to be adjusted. That was typically how they operated. You have to constantly fiddle with them and fuss with them. These lamps burn cleanly all the way to the end. And at the end, they start to flicker, but usually you put enough oil in, he and Aruch HaShulchan bring, to last for a long time. You don't have to worry. Certainly, like when it comes to electric lamps, electric lighting that we have today, there's no fussing with electric lamps. So certainly, the Ikra Din would seem to be, they're at least as good as the wax candles in the time of the early Polish Achronim. They're at least as good as these lamps in the time of the Aruch HaShulchan Mishnah Berurah. So that's why Rabbi Ribiat in the Lamatas Malachos says that, of course, it's mutter. I saw that some poskim are machmer, and Mordechai Eliyahu says that some poskim are machmer, even about electric lamps, you might come to use the switch. Not everyone is makel, but the minute certainly is to be makel. We use electric lighting to read and learn Torah on Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah wasn't so happy with the heter. The heter he brought about, we don't really fuss with them, he says, ein heter zebar, it's not such a clear heter, but for Talmud Torah, to avoid bittul Torah, you can be lenient with some other heterim. But the electric lamps, the minhag is we use it in general, whether it's to read our recreational reading, our Torah, we use it pretty much entirely, presumably because we feel electric lamps are like the wax candles of the early Polish Achronim, and even better, the whole Gzeira doesn't apply. And Daf Gimel, the Gemara brings a number of the laws of Nida, some of the laws of Bas B'chala, particularly the laws of Nida, some of the most commonly applicable, some of the most important halachos of Harchakos, of how a house bastard should behave in their period of Nida. The Gemara says in Daf Gimel, Lo yochel azavim azav ben hegel avera. They shouldn't eat together because it can lead to avera. We pass in the Shulchan Aruch, man and wife, when she's nida, they shouldn't eat at the same table unless you have a shiner. One of the main heter that we use typically is the idea of a heker. You put something on the table which is not normally there, or even if it is normally there, you're not using it in this meal. It should be between their plates. It's not enough to put it just at some random spot on the table. It should be between them, something they're not using during the meal. There are all kinds of questions about what to do if you're in public. Some poskim say that the need for heker doesn't apply if there are other people at the table. Some say that's true only if the people are between the husband and wife. Some say as long as there are other people at all, it doesn't matter. Some say that you still need a heker no matter what. That's a major machlokes achronim. But this is an important halacha that they can't eat together at the same table unless there's a heker, or if other people are sitting there according to some poskim in some configurations. Later on the daf, the Gemara says, Elaharim lo achal, ve'enav lo nasel gula beis Yisrael, ve'esh Yisrael lo timei, elisha nida lo yikrav, that listing all the virtuous conduct of the righteous person, he didn't approach an isha nida. So the Gemara says it doesn't just mean he didn't do the aver with her, of course, but it means, like Eish Yisrael, we say that even sleeping together in the same bed, even if they're even if they're dressed, but they're in the same bed, that's aser. Man and wife cannot sleep in the same bed when she is nida. That's how we paskin. They cannot sleep in the same bed. Now that itself is one thing, but the halacha takes this much further. The Ramah says at least that we take this much further, and we say even if they have separate coverings, and even if they're in two separate beds, the halacha is for Ashkenazim certainly that if they're in two separate beds, but the beds touch, that is still usher. That's the minhag, certainly, at least among Ashkenazim. This is one of the iconic aspects of the observance of family purity, that there are separate beds, at least when they are nida. Not only separate, there should be some space between them. How much space? Poskim disagree. Ramah doesn't say. Some poskim say any amount of space. Some poskim say enough space that they shouldn't accidentally touch each other when they roll over at night. Some say a couple of feet. Different opinions, but this is the minhag. Certainly for Ashkenazim, the minhag is that we have not only do we have two separate beds, when the woman is in a state of nida, the bed shouldn't even be touching. The Gemara then brings a story about someone who was punished for being lax in his observance of nida, even though he was a great Talmud Chacham. The Gemara tries to figure out what they did wrong with the couple. He says he asked her. Someone asked the man had died, so he asked the woman, "How did you conduct yourself?" So at one point, he asked, how did you deal with, in terms of touching and related things, how did you deal with each other when you were nida? She says, Chas v'shalom, he didn't touch me at all, even etzba ketana. So that's one of the key halachos of nida, that the couple cannot touch each other when she's nida. Tosas brings that Rashi was machmer, Rashi would practice astringency, he wouldn't pass things from hand to hand when she was nida. This is not explicit in the Gemara, there's extensive discussion with Rishonim about it, but again, this is brought in Shulchan Aruch. He can't touch her, and he also can't pass anything from hand to hand because he might touch her. And Tosha says one of the sources from this story, one of the possible sources for this stringency is from this story, because there's another version of the story in the Seder Eliyahu. It says that when he interrogated her on how she behaved when she was nida, so he told her, maybe you brought him something, you brought him a jar of oil, or you brought him stuff, and you're not allowed to do that, implying that bringing stuff, handing stuff from one to the other is usher. Tosha says, no, actually, if you read the end of that story, he said, and you touched him. Maybe the concern only was actual touching, not the passing. Halacha, we paskin that passing is usher. You're not allowed to pass things hand to hand when the woman is nida. Again, extensive, detailed halachas. Can you pass a child? We paskin you can't even throw things. There are all kinds of halachas of exactly what's included in this prohibition. But the basic rule is that a couple should not pass things from one to the other when the woman is nida.